everybody. You are listening to the Fiscal Feminist Podcast, where we will be tackling real financial issues so women can eliminate fear and take charge of their lives. I am your host, Kimberly Davis, and I am the Fiscal Feminist. So let's get to it.
I did an interview with a company and they asked me the question that really got me fixated on salary transparency. They were like, what are your salary requirements? And I realized, this question, I get it in every interview. And every single time I get it, I feel like the responsibility to say what I should be paid, and whether that's fair or not is placed on me instead of the company.
So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fiscal Feminist Podcast. Today, my guest is Hannah Williams, and I am so excited to speak with Hannah Williams because she is devoting her life and time right now to something that is very, very near and dear to my heart that I've written about a lot, which is salary transparency. And she has this amazing, groovy thing called Salary Transparency Street, which is on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere. And it's really taken the world by storm because it's providing some incredibly useful information. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Ms. Hannah Williams. Hi, Hannah. How are you today?
Hi, Kimberly. I'm doing awesome. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I realized when I was doing my research on Hannah, which opened my eyes up to a lot of things, but that she also is a Georgetown grad and she graduated in 2019. I graduated in 1980. So you guys can do the math. We do share that. We obviously went to school in Washington, D.C. So maybe that's why we both are a little bit proactive and want to, change the world.
I think it's something in the water over here. We're just gung-ho about changing the world, making it a better place.
So let me ask you a question, because you are young. You have created something and grown it to, pretty significant proportions in record time. Let's get a little bit of color about your background. Okay, why Georgetown? I know that I don't know what you majored in, but I know that your first job was a telemarketing job.
Yeah.
So let's just get a little background because I'm sure that so many people are just on the edge of their seat wanting to know how the heck you made this happen.
Yeah, I like telling this story not because I'm self-centered, but because I think that it's helpful. If I was in school, today, I would have loved to hear a story similar to what I've experienced in my career, because when I went to school, I really had no clue what I wanted to do. I changed my major 5 times my freshman year. And, I started actually at community college and then I transferred to Georgetown. So when I started school, community college kind of gets a bad rap. I went because I had a full honors scholarship. So my parents were like, you don't have a choice here. we know that you don't want to go, but you'll thank us in 4 years.
I would have said the same thing if you were my kid.
100%. And they were right. When I look back at it, I'm like, that was definitely the right thing to do. And I loved my experience at community college. I really recommend it for everyone.
And where were you? Where were you growing up at?
I grew up overseas, actually. So I grew up everywhere. My mom is Belgian, so I was born in Belgium. And my dad's American. They were both diplomats. My mom was a Belgian diplomat. My dad was an American diplomat. They met in Israel. They got married 3 months later. They've been together ever since. So I grew up traveling the world with them.
This is another thing that we have in common, because my first husband, who I was married to for over 23 years and is the father of my children, is Belgian and American.
No
so
way.
My kids all have Belgian passports and
amazing.
American passports, and they grew up in London for the most part. So we lived in London for a long time. So honestly, I've been to Belgium a million times. I had a little wedding ceremony there back in 1987.
I love that.
And
so
I actually
cool.
think I prefer Belgian food to all food in the world. And I would be just eating constantly if I lived there. So I can't believe it. You're Belgian.
That's amazing.
Kind of.
I never meet other Belgians or people who like even know what Belgium is. So that is so cool. We have so many things in common.
So you must have 2 passports then.
I do. Yep. And I'm a Belgian citizen. My mom is getting on my butt about that. I have to go to the embassy to make sure I don't
my
lose
daughters
it.
had to do that. When you turn 26 or something, or 27, they had to go
27.
and declare in their own right that they want to be Belgian citizens.
Yeah.
But honestly, it allows you to work in Europe if you want. You don't need work papers. It's kind of changed a little bit in Britain now because they left, the EU, which that's a whole other podcast discussion. But whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome because it really gives you an interesting perspective. So where were you going? What state were you going to community college in?
So I moved to Northern Virginia my senior year of high school. My dad retired from the Foreign Service. And so he was like, okay, the best place to go is DC. And so we moved up here and he kept working. But I started school. And so I went to Northern Virginia Community College when I graduated high school. So I was definitely in the DMV, Northern Virginia area. I've been here ever since, actually. So it's the longest place I've ever lived. I really like it here. I feel like the diversity and just the culture in this area is something I haven't found anywhere else in the country. So it's definitely my favorite place. I plan on staying here for a while. I digress. So I started school and I changed my major like 5 times. I went from nursing to computer science, cybersecurity, really just trying to find what I wanted to do. And by the time I transferred from community college to Georgetown, I had decided to stick with business, not because I was really passionate about it, but just because I think it was the only thing I was decent at. I was terrible.
You didn't want to be in the School of Foreign Service? That's where I was at. But yeah, I thought I was going to be a diplomat, but I ended up being a lawyer.
That was my sister. And my sister is actually a diplomat now. She's in Kinshasa in Africa. She's definitely living the dream. Yeah, she did exactly what my dad did. I was the total opposite. I wanted nothing to do with the Foreign Service. I think I was kind of tired of moving around so much. Yeah. And I was like, I want to put down some roots. And I kind of focused on sports business. I was really into sports. I was an athlete my entire life. And I think that's kind of where a little bit of my male versus female kind of trends started coming in, because I started realizing that there were big differences with men's sports and women's sports and the opportunities within them. And so I was slowly starting to open my eyes to discrepancies between genders and inequalities, whether I was aware of it or not. And I was at Georgetown my junior year, start of the spring semester. I would go to Georgetown or Georgetown, DC, Metro DC all the time for internships, and food trucks around the area are really popular. And I would see like these huge long lines at food trucks. And I was like, they should really create like an Uber Eats, but for food trucks, so people don't waste their entire lunch break, waiting for their food. And I had this idea and I decided to run with it. And I created a startup idea called Trucker. And I really, at that moment, just got full on bit by the entrepreneurship bug. And Georgetown has huge support for students in entrepreneurship. So I was really in the right place, whether I had planned for it or not. I ended up being in the right school for entrepreneurship. And the entire time I was there until I graduated, they really nurtured this like spirit in me to change things and to just be a self-starter. But by the time I got around to graduation, I think I graduated like May 12th. And at the end of April, I realized that I was a fish out of water with my idea. I had no money. I was actually in debt to my dad, about $7,500 I owed him on a bad coding deal. So I tried to get my app coded. It didn't work out. I owed him $7,500 and on top of my student loans. So I was like, I don't have a business. I don't have anything, that's going to make money for a while. I have a business that needs a lot of investment and I don't have that money. And
as do many businesses, right?
Yeah. So I learned really the hard way that I didn't have anything and I had to find a job, and it was so close to graduation. I was one of the few seniors at the time who didn't have a job yet. All my friends had received their offers in December. I was really freaking out. Like I thought I had royally messed up, and that was kind of a low point in terms of like my aspirations.
And were the other jobs that your compatriots at Georgetown had, were they in investment banking or banks? I mean, I believe it or not, when I went to Georgetown in 1976, that was the very first year of the business school.
No way.
Yeah.
They act like they've been around forever.
Well, they have. I mean, that was about 1 billion years ago. So I'm 64. You do the math. It's been a long time. But the point is that I love that they encourage entrepreneurship. But I'm wondering, was it because maybe you weren't going down that investment banking route?
Yeah.
That you felt like you were a little bit lost in trying to find your place?
Yeah. To be fair, it was a little bit of that. And it was also, everyone at the business school goes into management consulting, investment banking. It's really like you're either a consultant or you're in banking and finance. And I was a management degree. So I should be working in HR. I should be leading teams right now. And I couldn't find anyone hiring. I couldn't find anybody that was interested in kind of taking a chance on someone who didn't really know what to do. But, I was smart. I was bright. I was coachable. There were lots of things that I was open to. And I probably should have networked a little bit more. I'm also very shy and introverted, and that didn't help me when it came to, talking to recruiters and stuff. So I was really down on myself, and I took an interview in Arlington, like right across the bridge at a telemarketing firm, and it was literally cold calling people. And I was going to try, my role would have been to sell people legal software, like LexisNexis stuff. And they made me an offer for $40,000, which I thought was great. I thought that was great money at the time, and I accepted it because I didn't have any other offers. So I graduated on a Saturday, and I started working at that firm the following Monday. Started right away.
And so this is a thing I think we do not do well by our children and our young people, is that we don't ever really teach them about personal finance and personal advocacy. And again, as I mentioned to you before we began the podcast, I kind of look at things through the lens of women and try to help them in their sphere, because I feel like not as many people are talking to them. And I also think as children grow up, it may be that people don't speak to their girls in the same way about money as they speak to their sons.
Absolutely.
And I want women to negotiate more. I've read that 20% of women never negotiate. And I think we should have a personal finance in high school as a requirement, but only 3 states in the whole country require that. And I think part of learning how to be a professional is learning how to do your own advocacy. Yeah. And I agree, because I've read that you say it shouldn't be all up to the employee, and I 100% agree with that. But in the short term, if you don't negotiate for yourself, nobody's going to do it for you.
Right.
So when did the light bulb go off? This wasn't going to be your permanent gig.
The first day. The first day. I knew immediately. I knew it in my gut. My brain was just red alarms beeping like, Hannah, this is not for you. You're not supposed to be here. This isn't what you want to do. And so I started looking for another job basically my first week. And, coming straight out of school, starting my first job, trying to talk to people was not easy, because they were like, well, you just started this job, what do you want to do? And I got so frustrated, because anytime I felt like there was kind of confusion on their end about, well, she doesn't really seem like she knows what she wants to do. I was like, of course I don't. I'm 22
I'm like
years
21.
old.
Leave me alone. Right.
Exactly.
What do you want?
I was like, I haven't experienced nearly enough to know what I wanted to do. And so that was really tough for me. And, going back to your comment about advocacy and teaching girls how to advocate for themselves, when I was in school, and I went to Georgetown, great, fantastic school, I didn't have a class on workplace advocacy. I didn't have a Work 101 class. So even though I graduated with a very prestigious, expensive degree, I still did not know that you were supposed to negotiate your salary. I didn't know how to do market research. I didn't know what the laws were, that it's illegal to sign an NDA, saying that you can't talk about your pay. It's illegal for the company to tell you can't talk about your pay. I had no idea about any of those things. And so I started, doing other job interviews. Eventually, thank God, I got another job. This company really took a chance on me, breaking into data analytics and government contracting, which is very prevalent in the DC area. They found my resume actually on Georgetown's alumni network. So Georgetown did, in the end, kind of come through for me with helping me there. But I started a new career path in data analytics and government contracting, which I actually ended up really liking. It's funny, I thought I was terrible at math. I thought I was really bad at science. Definitely not a STEM girly. You know, I would have avoided anything about STEM. And when I started the job, I realized I'm actually pretty good with numbers. I'm very organized. And I like the fact that numbers tell a story and that numbers can lie, but most of the time they don't. You know, it's very straightforward. And so I think that in a way, my personality really meshed with being a data analyst. And I fell in love with it. And I started job hopping to try to make more money because I realized like I was not going to get a good raise staying with one company forever. You know, the amount of time it would take me to pay off my student loans was going to be decades. And at the time, I was really focused on paying off my student loans. That was something that I was kind of ashamed of, the fact that I graduated with the student loans, because my parents had put a lot of time and effort into saving money for me and my sister to go to school and graduate debt-free, which was part of the reason why I chose to go to community college. But Georgetown was very expensive.
It's very expensive. I mean, my kids all had student loans, and you have 3 kids 2 years apart, you know, going to private universities. It doesn't, you know, unless you're really, really wealthy and you've really done your forward planning, you know, with 529s from the day they're born. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, student debt is kind of part and parcel to the experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. And so I felt really dragged down by it. And I felt like, you know, limited with my potential, my earning potential, everything. I just became really fixated on it. So I narrowed down on job hopping as a way to increase my income and pay off my student loans. At the time, I still wasn't negotiating my salary. Anytime I did an interview, I was waiting all the way till the end of the interview process. So like 4 or 5, you know, calls, meetings deep to hear the job offer that they were going to give me. And then I would decide, okay, like this is enough for me to leave my company. This is worth it. I would accept, you know, I wouldn't negotiate it or anything. And so ultimately I got to this job as a senior data analyst. So the job came with like a promotion and it came with $90,000. So I had doubled my income in almost like a year and a half since starting in my telemarketing job. And I thought I was killing it. I thought I was making a good amount of money. You know, I thought that I was killing it, for lack of a better phrase. And immediately when I started that job, within like a month, my only other colleague on my team was fired. And so overnight, the role that I had accepted switched. You know, I was now supporting all the roles or all the teams that he was responsible for. So my workload doubled. I very slowly, I started working 40-hour weeks, you know, full 40-hour weeks. Now I was working 45. Now I was working 50. And eventually it got to the point where I was starting to work before the sun had risen. And when I stopped, it was well into the nighttime. And so my relationship,
like a law firm job, you were doing 90 hours a week.
Yep. And my company never replaced my colleague. They used, you know, the money for his role on software that I ended up not using. And so it was really unfortunate because I felt like I had accepted a role that was completely different within a month of me starting. And I was a little confused. I thought that the company would support me when I told them that I was starting to get burnt out. You know, I was very transparent about, you know, I'm really burnt out. Like, I don't have any time. My relationships are suffering. You know, basically this question just started kind of creeping in the back of my mind. Am I making enough for what I'm sacrificing?
So you were killing it, right? You had, in absolute terms, increased your salary almost twofold. Mm-hmm. But it seems like, again, you were looking at it from a personal lens, but you weren't thinking, is that an appropriate compensation for that job
Not at all.
A relative basis?
Yeah.
So I'm starting to see here, you're really good with data, so you know how to do analysis.
Yep.
And you realize that you were looking. So like for me, like everybody has a different number that they need to live on, right? But that shouldn't be the number what you're getting paid. Because the job might be, you should be paid more because that's what the job, you know, is requiring of you. Also, when this other guy got fired or left, was there ever any attempt on their part to say, okay, you're going to have increased responsibilities, so we're going to increase your salary?
No.
And if you went to them, how would they have reacted to that? Or you did go to them, didn't you?
Well, I told them eventually a couple months later, like, I'm really burnt out, like I can't keep doing this. But when it first happened, I had only been in the role like a month. So my mindset was, don't rock the boat, don't ask questions that would cause them to lose faith in you because you might be next. I was brand new. I knew that they were really taking a chance on me because I was now in communications data analytics. And prior to that, I was more in like legislation and stuff. So in data policy. So I was really insecure about my role in the company and on the contract. So I really didn't want to rock the boat and ask questions, like, when are you guys going to replace this guy? And eventually I finally did a couple months later when things started getting bad. I was like, was there any plan to replace my colleague? And they were like, oh, well, we spent the money already on that software that you use. And I was like, I don't use that software. You didn't even consult me about whether or not I needed it, So
that's terrible.
So the question about whether or not I was being fairly compensated just started creeping into the back of my mind. And also, this was the height of the Great Resignation. It was 2021. So people were quitting their jobs left and right. The question about, is the job worth it? And are you being treated fairly was really floating in the air. And that introduced me to this idea of advocating for myself. So one day I was like, let me just do a quick Google search. How much should a senior data analyst make in the Washington, D.C. metro area?
So let me ask you, how did you do that research? Glassdoor, Indeed, where did you get that info from?
I Googled it and I probably clicked on every single link on the first 3 pages of Google that popped up. The main sources that I really relied on for my research was Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, Salary.com, PayScale, Indeed, basically any reputable site that I found, which, had a good amount of data, good focus on tech. I was really trying to narrow down my salary based on my location, my years of experience, and my educational background. And that was difficult, right? Because if you look up that data, what comes back is an average number that the site has. They don't give you like a step-by-step, like this is, follow the line to. So it was tough, but I knew based on that research that everybody who was reporting their salary in my similar role was making 6 figures, and I wasn't. They were making like 110 to 130.
Which is a lot more.
Significantly more, and part of me was like, well, I'm young, I've just started. I don't have a data background, maybe I'm not worth that much. But that was BS to me because I was delivering the work. I was doing what they asked of me. I was a senior data analyst supporting a major contract. And that to me just, it got the idea of like whether or not I deserved it completely out of my head because I was like, bottom line, this isn't right. And then I got angry. I had disappointment. It was a roller coaster of emotions. And I think what was really disappointing to me was up till that point, I hadn't realized that work was not just a business relationship. It was a business decision on both sides. And there's profit and loss that comes into that. And ultimately, when a company hires you, they're not hiring you because they like you. They're hiring you to complete a job and they're hiring you to pay a certain number. And they have access to the same data that I do, market research. So they would know whether or not they're paying a fair market rate the same way I realized that I wasn't getting it. And that was really disappointing because I trusted my employer. I liked them. I was really proud to work for them. And that changed almost overnight. And so I put together this 2-page letter with like all my research. And not only that, I put together like the kudos that I'd received from our client. I put together the quantitative impact I'd had on the contract in like the short few months that I'd already been working for them. And I was like, I need my salary to be raised to market rate. Like, can I get X more? I think I asked for 105. I even undervalued myself then.
You did not go for the top number.
I didn't go for the top number. I still went low, which, in hindsight, I'm so annoyed with myself. But it didn't matter because they ran me around in circles for like 3 months. It took a really long time to get an answer from them. I had to keep emailing them every week. Like, is there an update? Is there an update? God,
that's so annoying.
It was so bad. And finally they got back to me and they were like, you can't get a raise until you've been with the company for a year. Like, we don't give out raises to anyone that hasn't been here a year. And on top of that, we don't give out raises of any more than 3 to 5% at any one time. And that was way less than what I was asking for.
Yeah, but this wasn't even a raise. This was like a different job. So, and I just want to make a comment. Everything that Hannah just described in what she did in writing the letter, having comparative analysis of other jobs, referring to the good words and recommendations from her clients and so on and so forth is textbook. I mean, this is what Harvard Business Review tells you should do when you're trying to negotiate, frame it communally, blah, blah, blah. You did all of that and you still were told no with some arbitrary, kind of BS line. Yeah. Oh, we're only going to do it if you've been here a year, whatever they come up with not to do it. So that is frustrating because you did everything right, and yet you still got no for an answer.
And I think it was at that moment where transparency started becoming kind of a solution to me and something that I became fixated on. And while I was thinking about all that, I started interviewing for another job and there were several moments where things got so bad. I was so burnt out on the contract that I almost quit multiple times without a backup. Like, I still didn't have another job, and it was so bad. So I knew that I had to keep looking, because if I was at a point where I was going to quit my job without something backed up, I was at my limit. And eventually, thank goodness, I stuck with it. I did an interview with a company and they asked me the question that really got me fixated on salary transparency. They were like, what are your salary requirements? And I realized, this question, I get it in every interview, and every single time I get it, I feel like the responsibility to say what I should be paid, and whether that's fair or not, is placed on me instead of the company.
But see, that goes back to the point again where they're very clever that way, right?
Yeah.
Because they're saying, what's your salary requirements? What do you need to live the life that you want? And they know you're not going to like double down and say, I need, twice as much. Because people need jobs. Yeah. So to me, this is so unfair because there's no relativity. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, so I may need more money than you do to live. So I might come up with a higher number because that's just what I need to live on. Yeah. And that's no way to value what the work product of that job is. It's insane.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I realized that a lot of the times when I've been getting salaries and offers and stuff, in hindsight, the offers I was getting were not based on pay structure. They were not, quantitative. They were based on what I had said my salary requirements were, which differs probably to people who have families. I was in in a couple, I didn't have kids. My expenses are so much lower. So when I look at a dream salary, it's way less than someone who has kids and is married, and
that should be irrelevant. That should really be irrelevant. I find this is one of the things that really ticks me off because I do think women suffer a bit more than men from this phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And, there is the motherhood penalty. Women, have 4% decrease in pay for every child that they have. Men get a 6% bump because people think they're going to be taking care of their family when a lot of women are now primary breadwinners.
Yeah.
But none of that should matter because it's about an objective job that we're going to be doing. And how do you value that, whether you need $50,000 or $250,000 to live on? This is what the job is. This is what the going rate is for this job.
Period. Yeah, absolutely. And so I decided to flip it on the recruiter and I asked her, well, I know what my requirements are, but I would like to check what your budget is just to make sure that it's in line with my requirements. And she didn't skip a beat, and I credit her so much for giving me this opening to transparency that I desperately needed. And she was like, yeah, our budget's about $115,000. And I was like, perfect. That is right in line with my expectations. And sure enough, they made me an offer for $115K. I tried to negotiate it, didn't succeed, but I was happy. I felt like I was making my market rate with that. And that was the job I was working until I quit to do Salary Transparent Street full time, which I started like 4 months into that job because I couldn't shake my experience in being underpaid and how it had impacted me. And I started a personal TikTok account where I started talking about, how much I made in every single one of my jobs and how I, learned about the importance of negotiation, how I started advocating for myself. And a couple of my videos went viral. And that was when I realized, no one's talking about this. And the only way that I felt I could really show the value of transparency was to put it directly in front of people. And the way I was going to do that was to ask people, strangers on the street. It was a very simple concept.
And how do people react? Because I do think, I've done some research on this. There was just recently an article in the Wall Street Journal about it and about whether it's a good thing. It makes workers more motivated or less motivated. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder if people even think about it or know enough about it. I know about it because I wrote the book, The Fiscal Feminist, A Financial Wake-Up Call for Women, and where I talk about intentional career choices and negotiation and how you have to think about these things on a micro and macro level. Yeah. So we need to get policymakers to think about it. But I know for a fact that salary transparency has never been able to pass the current Senate, and they're not going to do it. I mean, there are a bunch of, men for the most part and people who have made a lot of money in their day. And for some reason, they believe capitalism should not accommodate salary transparency for some inexplicable reason. So there are a couple of states that have made it a law. I think New York is one, maybe California.
Colorado, Nevada. Yeah, we've got some good movement.
But whether you're a man or a woman, this is something we all should be expecting to be a law.
I agree.
Like there is no downside to this, right?
No.
So when you're interviewing people, what are they thinking and feeling and saying about this?
Fully support it. People that I don't interview who say no to the interview because, they don't want to be on a massive platform, which is completely valid. They still tell me that they value transparency. They're like, you're doing an amazing thing. We need this. And I think it points to the fact that, you don't have to be on Salary Transparent Street to practice transparency. The value of transparency and talking about your pay really sees itself through in conversations in the workplace and between colleagues and friends and family, not on, my page. The value of my page is really to try to deconstruct the taboo around, the feelings people have about these conversations, because we've been spoon-fed by capitalism and corporate America that these conversations are bad, and they're not. They're so valuable. You have no idea how much you can make until you know how much you can make. And if no one's talking about it, that limit, you have no idea what the limit is.
To me, it's so ironic because think about 18th, 19th century England, for example. Yeah. It was, not acceptable to ever speak about money, right? Nobody ever wanted to talk about money. And then you think about capitalism, where all we ever talk about is money, is like you would think if workers, and according to this Wall Street Journal article, when people found out what their managers were making, it motivated them to work harder to achieve that number. So in my mind, it's kind of a pro-capitalist move, whereas I think some of the people in the Senate may say, well, it's
going to cause fighting.
It's going to cause fighting, or it's going to make a business owner have to pay maybe somebody more than they want to. And as a business owner, it's up to them as to how they want to do it. But if we're all about increasing global productivity, then I would think knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, the more motivated you're going to be to make the moves that you want to make to get to the point where you can be economically based on the jobs that you want to get and what other people are getting paid.
Absolutely.
So when people tell you, they say, okay, this is what I'm making, have they generally been content with that, or have they felt like they are behind the eight ball?
That's the one. Sometimes we get comments from people who are like, oh, they're lying, and I actually don't think people lie about their salaries, because why would you? It's going to be seen by millions of people. It doesn't behoove you to lie. But sometimes I do think people, if they do lie about anything, it's when I ask them if they feel they're fairly paid. And most of the time we hear yes. Sometimes we hear people go, I don't know. I think I've only heard like 2 or 3 people say flat out no. And I think that there's a little bit of fear of repercussions from their company if they say no. And I understand that. So I do think that there might be a little bit of a little lack of clarity there with people who think that they're not making enough. And I think that one of the arguments that I've heard a lot against pay transparency is people will say, well, then everyone's going to think that they're underpaid. No one's going to think that they're fairly paid. I disagree with that entirely. The entire point of pay transparency, not just, from the employees being able to have access to it, to be able to have a transparent system means that the company has to go into their records, all the data, all the salaries that they pay people, and they have to recognize whether or not people are fairly paid, which means that they have to develop a pay structure, a system, right, a way that they can very clearly say, Karen in this role makes X because of X, X, and X. And that has to be very clearly structured. That way, there won't be any questioning about, well, this person makes more than me and I don't understand it. That's the system we have now because of secrecy. So there is more infighting in the office about pay because of secrecy. If we make things transparent, that means that there's an actual structure in place. So actually, you wouldn't have anybody say, I don't think I'm fairly paid. I think I'm underpaid, right, because
there's
the
objective standards. It's called,
exactly.
And it's exactly what you were doing. It's data analysis.
Yeah.
And it's actually, in my mind, kind of the epitome of the free market economy.
Yep.
Right? So for all of those people out there that, think we're trying to make this a socialistic thing and everybody should get paid the same. This is not that. This is not that. This is about companies knowing why they're paying employees what they're paying them for the job they do, being bold enough to put it out there so that people who are trying to work can make, a logical evaluation as to whether or not they want to do that job based on what that job is valued at on an objective basis.
Right.
So this message of yours, I think, is well overdue. And I'm really glad that your journey took the twists and turns that it did to kind of put a light under you to just go do this, kind of pivot and start this whole program. So I want to know a couple things about actually you building this business, right?
Yeah.
Because you went from having this job, and it sounds like you didn't have a job. You just quit and decided you're going to really make this your job, which I applaud. And I know, not everyone can do that. And I mean, not to get into it, but if you do have your emergency fund in order, you might be able to do it, which gives you a little breathing room to pivot. But so you've done this. So you start this business. You are obviously, I would assume, on a shoestring, as most people are at the beginning of a business.
Yeah.
How did you get funding from an investor? And what did that all look like? And then the next thing I'm going to ask you is, where do you think you're going with all of this?
Yeah. So I will say that I feel my situation is very unique. And when people are like, well, how did you make so much money? How can I do that? I want to preface that when I started this page, like the first day I put an interview out, it went mega viral overnight. And all our videos that we posted, and we posted basically one video every single day for the first 6 months, all of those videos went viral, easily over 1 million views each.
And why do you think that is? To the extent you have any idea, because I know these things can be random. What is it about the videos that you think, the very first one that you did, who were you interviewing? How many people? And what do you think happened that made everyone go wow, I need to watch this?
Yeah, I think that it was, the biggest thing was people have been, talking about salaries and stuff for decades. I'm not going to be the first to say I'm the first person to ask people how much they make, but we were the first page to do it in our style, where we went on the street and we asked a ton of people, what do you do for a living? How much do you make? And questions about their career, like, how did you get here? What background do you have? Tell us what has worked for you. I have been on social media since I was, in middle school. Like, I've been around. I've never seen anything like that. And so I think that part of the success was that we were the first to create something of this caliber. And we had like 4 people in our first video. So it was very like quick, high salaries as well, which, to me, when we were asking, I didn't think that they were high salaries because I was interviewing in DC. But from an outsider's perspective, someone in Idaho hearing someone make, 6 figures, whoa.
Yeah. Well, the average, what is the average pay?
I think
right?
It's like 52,000.
It's like, so, it's in the 50s. So
definitely. Yeah. So I think it was a little bit of the first to do it, the high salaries based on our location, and also the structure, and how we presented it, the editing, a lot of things that just caught with people. And also we had a really cool name. So I think people were like, oh, that's cool. Like, I know exactly what that is. Instant follow, and so our page blew up overnight. And within like 2 or 3 weeks, I was so overwhelmed with balancing both, and really more so my full-time job, and Salary Transparent Street. But really my energy and like my passion was fully into Salary Transparent Street. I was like, the thing that I kept thinking about was whenever I was doing a job interview and people were like, why are you leaving your last role? I would always say, and this was 100% true, I'm looking for a place to have more impact, where my work actually helps people. That's what I wanted. And I found it. Like, I literally created an account where I get to help people every single day with my content. And so to me, it was a no-brainer that I wanted to do it full time. And I was also kind of thinking, this is my moment, like this doesn't happen to everyone. You have to grasp it and you have to run with it. I was 25 at the time that we launched. I live with my fiance, so I have like really good support. I had an emergency fund. I had a great emergency fund.
I want to say I love this girl. Okay. She's an entrepreneur, a risk taker, and she had an emergency fund.
Yep. So I'm a risk taker, but having the emergency fund was so crucial to me to take the risk and know that I would be able to do something with it. Like, I had a plan. It wasn't like, I'm going to quit my job and become a content creator. I knew what I wanted to achieve. And so I think that being bit by the entrepreneurship bug way back when, whether it went to sleep for a little bit, it just came right back. And I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And I didn't really know what the role would look like. It was going out and doing interviews, editing content. I basically just created my own role. But right now, my formal title is founder and CEO of Salary Transparent Street. So I run all our operations. I have an executive assistant
business,
now.
right?
It's a business. Yeah. Yep. So I'm fully running a business. And to get back to your question about, revenue and how we started making money, we didn't make money like on brand partnerships, which is our bread and butter, until I think September was when we signed our Indeed deal. But from like the first week we launched, we started talking to Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor.
And did you approach them or did they approach you?
A little bit of both. So I started working with these 2 agents who are in the content creation business. They approached me and they were like, we love what you're doing. We would love to connect you with some partners. And so they already had some contacts with some of those companies. There were some people that I was talking to that I had reached out to on LinkedIn that we brought together. And ultimately, we started like comparing packages and offers from all these different companies. And I ended up saying no to LinkedIn, Monster, and ZipRecruiter before getting an official offer from Indeed, because Indeed was the only company we talked to that I personally had like used prior in my career, that I really loved. And that was important to me. But they also were the only company that really fixated on our mission for salary transparency.
Right.
They were talking to us about what they were doing internally, how they were pushing salaries to be listed on their job listings on their site. And I was like, I only want to work with people who understand the mission and also support it with me.
And want to be part of the mission.
Yep.
So let me ask you a question about this, the agents, because I think a lot of people find this a very murky world.
It is. It is. More transparency is needed in the agent space.
So are these like people that call themselves agents for content creators, and do they get a percentage? How do they get paid?
And I'll preface this by saying that I no longer work with these clowns because they fully took advantage of us. They really took advantage of the fact that I didn't know how these partnerships worked. You know, I'd never done a partnership with a major brand before. So I actually ended up giving away 33.3% of our deal to them, which, and I will say this to anyone listening, is an absurd percentage. You should not be giving away more than 10 to 20% of a brand deal brought to you by an agent, meaning that the person, you know, made that introduction, led a couple of the calls or email communication to get the conversation going. But ultimately, I was the one who pulled together the package. I was the one who am building the content, you know.
Right.
So
you are the talent, so to speak.
Yep.
You know?
So I learned the hard way that 33.3% was really abysmal and taking advantage of us. So I no longer work with them, but I was able to pivot to, you know, working with other agents. There's a lot of freelance agents out there. They'll probably just drop in your email, or you can find them on LinkedIn. But a lot of the times now I actually create my own deals. Like I manage the partnerships, the email communication, the reach out. I do a lot of that myself just because I don't like giving a cut away for someone who just made me an introduction.
And then you can hand select who you want to work with.
Exactly.
I mean, there are certain messages that will resonate with what you're trying to, you know, if you were going to pair up with somebody who's like totally not in line with what you're saying, then it all becomes about advertising and branding and not about the message. And I want to give a shout out to Indeed, because when I went through this horrific divorce and came back from London, I really was not in a good place. And the divorce decree was not followed by my ex-husband. And although there was some money, I had a child at Georgetown and 2 kids in private high school.
Yeah.
And I was we were going through divorce, trying to keep everything, all the balls in the air. And I didn't have a lot of time when I got back from London, but I had to find a job. And I was 53 years old, and there were not a lot of people clamoring to hire a 53-year-old.
Yeah.
I've had people in the recruiting world tell me to take all of my legal background and legal jobs and investment banking jobs off because I was overqualified at my age and all this stuff. So I went on Indeed and I literally applied for all kinds of different jobs. But at one point, Indeed popped up again and said, you would be very perfect to be a financial advisor. Apply at Morgan Stanley, which is what I did. And I actually took all the tests and I ultimately got the job. I did a little networking along the way, but I got the job. And honestly, I mean, I became very successful as a wealth manager. I'm still a wealth manager. That's my day job. Like you, this is my passion, the fiscal feminist. But it was really because of Indeed popping up in my email telling me to apply for this job. And, you know, when I did get the job, I did not get paid the same as some of my colleagues who were actually hired the same day that were younger and male. And that's because they said that my background at that point was no longer relevant. I hadn't lived, and it was like, okay, I was a corporate securities lawyer on Wall Street, you know, for like a while. I think it's relevant, but I needed a job and I needed health insurance. So
that's the big
they
one.
basically told me, we're not negotiating with you, take it or leave it. And I took it, and I just knew I had to be better than everyone else if I wanted to succeed. But honestly, I thought Indeed, you know, I always talk about it because it's like that random email, you know, helped. So I want to understand, I have 2 things I want to talk to you about, and then we'll wrap up because I know we're getting a little bit long. But one, but I could talk to you all day, and I could
talk about this all day.
I love your enthusiasm and your passion, and it just is so encouraging to me to see someone out there spreading the word about people, you know, engaging in their careers and wanting transparency, because it's like, this isn't 1950 where people stayed at IBM for 40 years and just were grateful for the benefits and a stable job. Like, this isn't that world anymore. So we need to get with it as a society. But what's your end game? Where does this go? What's the next thing? You're interviewing people, you're raising consciousness. But where are you going with it from a business point of view? and from a message point of view. And then I want you to just briefly talk about the 3 C's.
Yep. So where I'm going with it is, to me, those 3 C's, which I'm thrilled you brought up, because it's kind of like my little pride point where I'm like, my Georgetown degree came back in and I was like, figure it out. So my 3 C's are community, Congress, and corporate. And those are really like my focus points and where I want things to go. In terms of our largest audience, it's really our community. It's workers, and, it's people in every single career field you can think of. Everybody needs transparency. We all need it, no matter what job you do. And so my mission with our community is to show them, the value of transparency, and encourage them to start practicing it in their daily lives. Start having these conversations with your colleagues, your friends, your family. And hopefully our content can give them some courage and some backbone, something that they can bring towards them. Like, hey, I saw something on Salary Transparent Street. I was just wondering, did you negotiate your salary? Things like that. Throw me under the bus if you need to. Use me as an opening to have these conversations. I don't mind. Then the biggest one for me that I'm really focusing on right now is Congress. So we are seeing a lot of movement with states passing pay transparency laws like California, Colorado, New York City. So there's movement that's happening. But to me, I don't think that we're going to get the solution we want until we have a federal law, something
100%.
Yeah, because just going by states doesn't make any sense. And we're already seeing problems that are coming from it. There's companies that refuse to hire anyone who lives in Colorado because they have to abide by pay transparent legislation over there. So if they want to hire people in Colorado, they have to list the salary for those applicants. So some companies are literally choosing not to hire anyone from that state so that they don't have to do that.
And do you have any research as to why do they just feel like it's going to be so disruptive to their workforce that they...
I think I know what it is. It's 2 things. First of all, it's going to cut into their bottom line a bit because they are going to have to meet people at market rate. And I think what they're scared of is once this comes out and people find out that they're underpaid, those people are either going to leave or the company is going to have to meet them at their market rate. So they're either going to have to spend money or they're going to have to spend money to replace the people that they leave. I could care less about how they feel about it. I'm here for the workers and for people getting paid. So boo-hoo, corporate America. But then I think the other second thing is that companies are not prepared for pay transparency. Right now, the salaries that they're offering people are just based on their own personal decision. If they like an applicant more, they'll just chuck another 2 or 3K on the offer. There's no structure. Yeah. And, if they had that structure, pay transparency would be really easy, but they don't. And so it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of investment, a lot of time for them to create these structures. I think that there's a lot of great software out there right now, like GapSquare, Pequity, PayScale. They have software that will literally integrate into your HR, system, take all your data and spit out an audit, some type of report that will tell you these people are not at market rate. These people are. This is the status of inequity in your organization. So it's not that hard. I think corporate America is just not willing to change and they're not open to it.
Is there a study that has been done or could be done where the companies and the states or a state or location, that's California, New York, I don't know, where they have had pay transparency, they've done the homework, and then they can compare that worker productivity went up and added X to the bottom line so that it is actually numerical. It's not like a bunch of, woke people, quote unquote, the woke people asking for more information. And as I listened to Fox Business this morning, because as a wealth manager, I have CNBC on and Fox Business. I have them all on at the same time. You got to get all
sides, yeah.
And, I heard one of the news people there, who's a big deal, say, this woke culture, they just want more and more and more regulation. And, they want the child care tax credit. Oh, I'm sorry. These are the same people that are saying to women they should have babies they can't afford.
Right.
If they don't want to give them a child care tax credit to take care of their kids. And so to them, this is just regulation.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not seeing people.
And like, this person was like, if I don't think we're in a mess today. I actually think, considering all things, we're actually not too bad a shape. There might be a recession, but
could be worse.
There may not be. Inflation is coming down. More people are employed, whatever. But, this person's comment was, well, if Donald Trump was still president, this economic mess wouldn't be here because there wouldn't be so much regulation.
No,
so how
that's
do we
incorrect.
fight this overriding notion that all regulation, even if it's arithmetically showing that it's beneficial, is bad? Because this is kind of falling into that big basket of regulation. Even though it's not regulation, it's just information.
It's not regulation. And, it really is just straightforward information. It's information that everyone should have access to. What I really like about our mission is that I feel like it shouldn't be a political thing. It shouldn't be a left or right argument. We should all be able to agree that we deserve to make a fair market rate based on what we do, And then I hear all the time people will say, well, the gender pay gap doesn't exist. It does. And more than that, it's not just, men versus women. To me, what I really dig deep into is that the pay gap is so much worse for minorities, workers with disabilities, the LGBTQ community. Those are the people that if you are in an interview and your salary is being determined by your interviewer, there is open room for bias to affect the salary that you are offered. And that happens all the time. And we know it does because there is a gap. There are multiple gaps. And so
there's multiple gaps. I mean, the 82 cents is just, really for
that's just
privileged, kind of privileged white women, to be honest.
Women.
If you look at, Black women and Latina women,
it's so much worse.
They are really suffering out there. And I can't even get my head around what anyone in, some people in the LGBTQ community might be going through. Because, honestly, in a lot of professions, if you're not whatever it is people think you should be, then, there's always room for bias and people can be brutal. And so this is the thing. I just want to say this. For those of you who, and I know a lot of these people in my world, I like to work hard and make money. I'm an ambitious woman. I have been not paid the going rate. I have been, I've been discriminated against my age. And back in the 80s, forget that. There was no rules back then. I was told I shouldn't have a baby or if I would never be a partner in a law firm by my law firm. But, I do believe in work ethic and I do believe in the concept of capitalism, but I do not think in any way, shape, or form what you are suggesting is socialism or is any kind of regulation of pay.
Yeah.
So just correct me if I'm wrong, but your message is in the free market, whatever these skills are worth, the pay should be X because that's what most people think it should be worth.
Yeah.
And then everyone should know that. So that they know if they want to do that job, that is what the free market is telling them the pay should be.
Absolutely.
And then it's just completely objective. It's not like, hey, I'm saying that, this job should be paid this because there should be equality of income. Am I interpreting your message right? Because
Absolutely.
I don't want people to start criticizing this message based on some nonsense that isn't true.
Yeah. I think a lot of people hear our mission and they think that what we're advocating for is for everybody in the same role to make the same amount. That's not at all what we're saying. What my mission is to make sure that salaries are structured and that pay is structured. So whatever you decide to pay for a role on your team, you have a very clear understanding that you can translate to that candidate or that employee that you are paid X because of actual quantitative factors like your education, your years of experience, your location, all those things. And, you might have, I don't think that it means that, two software engineers in the same role, same level will make exactly the same. If one software engineer has a master's degree and a specific skill and their colleague in the same role only has a bachelor's and doesn't have that skill yet, sure, there is room for a little bit of discrepancy there, but it has to be fair. And both candidates, both employees should be able to understand why there is that discrepancy. And going back to why I think pay transparency is so valuable is because now you're telling that candidate who's at a lower pay, this is exactly what you have to do to reach that next level. I think that it's ridiculous that people don't really understand that transparency is a viable system and that it would help people because the corporate, our actual government, our federal government abides by a transparent pay structure. If you work for the federal government, you can see what everybody in your office makes. It's all online, and you have clear steps of what you have to do to get to that next level. It's very clear. Pay is structured. So if our federal government has been abiding by this system for decades, why is corporate America not also doing the same thing? Because right now, pay is just kind of thrown out there as a number that, may or may not suit the candidate based on the hiring manager. It's not structured. And so a lot of people are not making what they deserve. And there's also a lot of confusion. Once you have that transparency, productivity goes through the roof. People now know what they have to do to reach that next level. So they're more likely to stay with you longer because they have that clear action plan. It's not secretive and, unsure. Like it would suck to be like, well, maybe I have to stay at this company for a year and maybe I have to do this to reach this next pay level versus, oh, I have to complete this training and I have to go get this certificate and I have to make sure that I know this skill to ask for this next salary bump. And that's what you would get. It's a no-brainer to me. I think it would help with mental health in the workplace. It would solve so much inequity. It boosts morale in the office. And I think that that's something a lot of companies could use right now with layoffs being really rampant. I think that corporate culture right now is really based on the higher ups and the people that are managing things. There's not really any culture in the office anymore. People are just kind of trying to find what makes them passionate or what pays the bills. There's no, just going into the office for the fun of it anymore. And, work shouldn't be fun. But once you have that paid, transparent structure in place, people feel secure and people will feel a lot more willing and excited to go into the office than they are right now.
I think it's motivational. I think knowledge is power. And when you know what you have to do, you will be, you'll be motivated to go and do it. And I also think you're right. Like the workplace is in transition, right? There's a lot of talk about, whether everybody should be back in the office 8 hours a day or the benefits of remote work. I frankly believe that remote work has a place. I think if, people are caregivers, whether it's for children or for parents, I have elderly parents, or just for whatever reason, some people may be more productive if they can work remotely sometime or all the time. And I do think being in the office does have some camaraderie and energy that you can share. But if you're in a place where everything is like, dark secrets and nobody knows why anything is the way it is, then it's nothing more than like a dictatorship. It's like a benevolent dictatorship. And that's insane. Like we don't run our country that way. Why should we run our companies that way? Right?
Agreed.
So I think what you're doing is so important. I feel like I'm a newscaster right now, but because I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think you're going to run for office? Because I would vote for you. I think you should do it.
Oh my gosh. That's so crazy. I've been told many times that I should run for office. And I've thought about it. I'm not going to lie. I've definitely thought about it. I'm honestly terrified of like the political landscape because I'm worried about if I do this, and I do run for office, how much negative criticism that is not, politically grounded is going to come at me. Like I look at what AOC gets, and I'm just like, gosh, I would just be another AOC. And I don't know if I could handle the criticism. But then I'm like, somebody has to do it, so why not me?
And I don't really see you kind of in the AOC. I mean, what you're saying is logical. Okay.
I think
in the sense that you're a data analyst. You are a logic person. You are using math. You are not asking for anyone to get a giveaway or a handout or anything like that.
No, not at all.
I mean, honestly, I think you could thread the needle where people from both sides of the fence could say, actually, this is going to add to productivity in this country and in our workplaces. And that's the way I want to frame it, because I know people will say all kinds of stuff. Like on my Instagram page, a lot of people, you can get hate from all kinds of people.
Yeah.
I've been called all sorts of things, an old white feminist. I am an old white feminist. I don't know what they want me to do about it. I was born in 1958. I was like the glory. I'm trying to take this to the next level. I mean, anyone who identifies with not having a level playing field, then I'm talking to them, okay?
Yeah,
because
same.
Women are part of that. Women do have some unique things just because, they do get stuck doing a lot of household chores and childcare because they do not advocate for themselves even in their families. But this, what you're doing is, it's almost like it's math, okay?
Yeah, it just makes sense.
It just makes sense. And I applaud you for everything that you're doing and for getting people to talk about it, because that's the first step in everything. And you know, it's not taboo. Like, people used to think it was really taboo to say, oh, well, like, how much money do you make? Like, what do you make for your job?
It's
and people were like, you know, oh my God, like, why are you asking me that? Yeah, why is that rude? It's just like, hey, it's consumer, consumer information. I want to know.
Yeah.
So I like that you're doing this. I applaud you. You are a beacon for all young people. I guess you're Gen Z, right? So
I call myself a geriatric Gen Z because I'm like right on the cusp there. I like grew up millennial and then they were like, you're Gen Z. And I was like, okay, if that makes me empowered, I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to call myself a juvenile baby boomer then, because I don't want to be a geriatric baby boomer. I'd really be in bad shape. I'd have one foot on the banana peel. Well, you are awesome. And I just thank you so much for taking time out of your life to talk to me about all of this stuff. I know that my audience is going to love it. And so tell everyone where they can find you and become one of the 5 bazillion people that follow you so they can spread the word.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me. If you want to follow me, I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you don't have any of those, we're at Salary Transparent Street. If you search salary, we're the green bubble. We're usually the first thing that pops up. So I hope to see you on social media around.
Well, I want you to tell your mom and dad that they have produced an awesome daughter who is going to be a change maker in this world. And if there's anything you can do with your life as a parent, that is the biggest contribution you can make. So if you run for office, I come to DC a lot because I still like to come and, walk around Georgetown.
Please let me know. I'd love to grab coffee
I'm gonna hit you up,
something.
girl, because I am a big DC fan. My daughter, as I told you, went to Georgetown as well. And her husband went to Georgetown, and his parents live in Bethesda.
Family.
Yeah, so we are frequently there, and I like to go to the Tombs every now and then and just have a hamburger and a beer and pretend I'm 18 again, 1977.
Sign me up. Next time you come to town, I'd love to go to Tombs.
We'll go to the Tombs. Well, you're awesome. I applaud you. Carry on spreading the message, and, don't be deterred. Even if people say stuff, who cares? They're wrong. You're right. So,
thank you. Thanks,
all right,
Kimberly.
my dear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today to the Fiscal Feminist Podcast. Please take a minute to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. And I would really appreciate if you could also rate and review it. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at The Fiscal Feminist, or check out the website fiscalfeminist.com.